Hello everyone, Paulina here from Al Jazeera. With the recent peace talks held in April regarding Yemen, it is crucial to understand how this conflict is going to evolve. Is the war about to end in Yemen? It is a decisive turning point. For the first time in 7 years, the two biggest rivals in Middle East agreed to negotiate and restore their diplomatic relations. While the UN did not manage to bring these two parties to the table, they were able to establish a ceasefire this year, and China was successful in initiating the peace talks towards ending war. Thus, the immediate to long-term threat analysis that we bring you today with a panel of researchers will help shed light on whether a new chapter of Yemen could bring peace or escalate war. This analysis is used by security experts like Darinel Rodriguez Torres for conflict prevention by identifying causes of violence in the near and distant future. It considers short, medium, and long-term factors, enabling implementing actors to devise strategies for prevention of urgent threats.
For today's analysis, you can see the research team here. The purpose of the panel today is to understand the underlying causes of the conflict in Yemen and the specific events that lead to the escalation of violence in Yemen. Then the scope is to look at an international perspective for peace building in Yemen and determine possible outcomes for the ceasefire and the restoration of diplomatic ties between Saudi and Iran.
But why do we keep talking about Saudi and Iran? Why do these two countries' relationship impact the situation in Yemen? To understand better the situation, let me explain to you the context in the country. The initial trigger of the conflict took place during the Arab Spring in 2011. Yemen was demonstrating against former President Ali Abdullah Saleh, who was forced to hand power to Mansour Hadi. But the democracy that the population hoped for did not occur. The political transition failed with massive unemployment, suicide bombing, and separatist movements that broke apart the country. The war officially began in 2014 when the former President Saleh and the Houthis, a Shia Muslim minority from the north, took control of the capital and ousted the Hadi government. Saudi Arabia considered it as an immediate threat, accused Iran of supporting the rebels, and launched a military campaign, backed by the Western powers. As you can see on the map, the conflict in Yemen has rapidly taken on a sectarian dimension, with the Shia Houthis facing opposition from the Sunni majority countries in the region, led by the Saudis. Therefore, to the question who are the main actors of this conflict, we can refer to the stakeholder map, with Ali Abdullah Saleh, the Houthi movement, Yemeni government, Saudi Arabia, Iran and its militarized arm Hezbollah as a primary stakeholder, and regional and global actors as a secondary stakeholder. The war has now been going on for 8 years and has resulted in the deaths of 377,000 people and the internal displacement of more than 4 million Yemenis within the country. But now, we take you back to the panel who will be conducting the elaborate analysis for you.
So, as you can see here, I wrote there that there are 3 violent incidents that happened in Yemen. Most importantly now is to think about the present, the future, and how we can solve this problem. First, the Saudi-led strikes at the Houthi positions in March 2015. So, at that date and that month, Saudi-led coalition and Saudi military have airstriked Houthi positions, but have targeted also civilians, roads, infrastructure, schools and hospitals, and all civilians there in that area were heavily affected. Second, the battle for Aden and the battle for Taiz in 2015 also. So, in this year, there has been 2 battles in Yemen. First of all, the battle for Aden, where the president Hadi took refuge there, and the Houthis followed him, and there has been a huge fight between both groups, which led to many casualties when it comes to civilians. On the other hand, in Taiz, the 3rd largest city in Yemen, they both fought for its control, and it also caused many infrastructure problems. Hospitals, schools, and homes were raided. Women were abused and people were killed. Third and finally, the siege of Hodeidah from 2018 till present date. The Hodeidah is a very important port in Yemen, and it's one of the only ports that welcomes humanitarian assistance from shore and from the sea. So they both parties were fighting to control it, and what happened in the end is that the humanitarian assistance stopped, and the people were poorer than ever and more dire for humanitarian assistance that they could never get because of the fighting on the port. So this is what led in the end to what was described by the United Nations as the world's worst humanitarian crisis in the world. But most importantly now is to think about the present, the future, and how we can solve this problem.
Now, I bring you to the urgent threats of violence, the first one being breach of ceasefire. With the possible failure of ongoing negotiations, armed conflict might re-escalate with worse consequences after a possible failure of a potential ceasefire. This could be complicated if the Houthis continue to interfere with the delivery of aid supplies. The second one is economic instability and food insecurity. Yemenis endure the world's worst humanitarian crisis, with over half of the population experiencing severe food insecurity. Reliant on imports for sustenance, Yemen's currency collapse has caused a soaring prices and reduced purchasing power, leaving millions unable to meet basic needs. Civilians across the country have suffered from worsening economic conditions and lack of basic services. Southern Yemen witnessed protests over deteriorating economic conditions and basic services. And finally, internally displaced refugees. In Yemen alone, more than 4 million people have become internally displaced persons, which can cause more people to compete over scarce resources and create identity-based social tensions between areas in the country.
Next, let's delve into the key factors that can rekindle the violence in Yemen and some positive trends that we have seen in the recent past. Now, these factors are for our year 1 to 4 analysis and beyond the 5 years plus. First one being political instability, power struggles within factions, economic crisis, resource scarcity, and humanitarian crisis are key issues and factors that could lead to violence in the first 2 years. However, it is also important to note the positive trends and the hope for peace that has been created by the UN ceasefire and the China peace talks. These positive trends have created a solid baseline for the establishment of peace in Yemen by bringing Saudi and Iran together. The political landscape in Yemen is fragmented, with power struggles among factions and the absence of a comprehensive settlement. Economic crisis and poverty create conditions ripe for violence. Resource scarcity, especially water and food, heightens tensions and fuels conflict as witnessed in the protests last year in southern Yemen. The severe humanitarian crisis exacerbates social tensions as the population struggles for survival. Together, these factors could contribute to the resurgence of violence in the initial years. From the third year onwards, we regard fragmentation and extremism, sectarian and ethnic tensions, proxy dynamics, and regional interference as the key issues and factors for the reappearance of violence. The competition and interference of regional powers like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the UAE can escalate the conflict and potentially lead to localized clashes or broader escalations. Additionally, the conflict has created space for extremist groups like the Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State to thrive, further complicating the security situation. Yemen's history of sectarian and ethnic divisions also adds to the risk of violent resurgence. In addition to the regional powers, the involvement of major global powers such as the United States, China, or the European Union could play a significant role. If these powers engage in actions that undermine peace efforts or escalate conflicts, it could have spillover effects on Yemen and exacerbate the existing violence. Furthermore, geopolitical tension between these powers is also likely to impact the peace process in Yemen. In conclusion, with the peace talks and initiation of diplomatic relations, the situation in Yemen is stable for the moment. However, stability is in a precarious position, and the end result of war or peace now entirely depends on the steps taken by the various stakeholders involved. Additionally, rebuilding Yemen is a priority for the government and the region in order to maintain the peace, as the people have suffered grave humanitarian and economic losses. Ensuring access to food, infrastructure, basic human rights, and economic rights are key for maintaining the peace, as a disenchanted population can be a major cause for conflict resurgence. Additionally, It is crucial for international actors to keep their geopolitical interests separate from the conflict, as after the peace talks in China, there has been backlash for the United States as the Chinese delivered on a promise made by the US. Decades of militarized American foreign policy in the Middle East have created problems in the region, and it is pertinent for global actors to maintain a neutral stance with regards to Yemen. While the peace talks are a ray of hope, we still have a very long way to go, as it is important to monitor and carefully outline the next steps for sustained peace in Yemen.